And if it had not been for a strong resale program, we would have closed half of our locations and been in a really tough spot. And so that really illustrated to me the importance of thinking through that resale program in advance. And that's my soapbox. What do you think,
It's a
Jake?
great soapbox. B, I think we just clip the whole episode here and let you roll with that because that was unbelievably well articulated.
Welcome to Dear Frannie, the franchise advice column. I'm your host, Catherine LeBlanc. And along with my co host, James Vetrano, we've spent our careers inside growing franchise systems. From marketing to operations, we break down real questions and real challenges and share the kind of answers you only get from experience. Let's jump in. Welcome to Dear Frannie. I'm your host, Catherine.
And I'm her co-host, James.
James, get us started. What's our this or that question today?
Let's go, host. Do you treat underperformance as a coaching problem, or do you treat underperformance as an exit signal?
I'm going to take the side of let's start treating underperformance as an exit signal. And this sounds harsh because
Cold-hearted, totally cold-hearted.
everybody everybody struggles a bit and they need to, get it going. But at the end of the day, I think that the biggest thing that we miss in franchising in our selection process is really identifying who's going to have the grit and stamina to really understand what it takes to run a small business and what it takes to be successful in a small business. And so when you see underperformance, and maybe not in the beginning, maybe you give them a period of, how are we going to turn this around? But when you see a regular appearance of underperformance, I think it's a stronger signal, not that the business is not operating as it should, but maybe you have the wrong operator in the business. And the earlier that you can identify that, the earlier you can identify a strategy to move them out of the business and make sure that that location is successful. Because at the end of the day, yes, our responsibility is to make sure that our franchisees are successful and profitable. And sometimes that means that they shouldn't be a franchisee. And so if you can save them from bankruptcy or, the thousands, millions of dollars that they're going to sink into an underperforming location, you may be doing them a service. All right, James, you take the other side.
I love like the corporate talk, like this cold-hearted sort of cut it off, but we're trying to help them in the long run. PR spin. Kudos to marketing. Look, I think it starts with how do we define underperformance, right? And so let's just presume that we have a accepted definition of underperformance, and that definition becomes activated at a certain point during the operation of a franchise unit. I think first and foremost, it's a coaching problem and an involvement problem. If you don't have some indication that there's going to be some underperformance indicated by the franchisee, that's initially on you, right? Like you should not be shocked that there is something happening on a downward trend that's going to trigger the underperformance warning. So I'm going to go with, hey, underperformance out of the gate, underperformance at a certain point in time is indicative of a relationship or coaching problem. I think it gets to your point when underperformance starts carrying on over a quarter to two, then maybe you may be right. But the first instances of underperformance, I think, is coaching. And I'd be on my FBC, I'd be on my corporate ops team for franchising of, hey guys and gals, why weren't we aware of this and what is the rationale and or reason for it? So first sign of underperformance, coaching, continued sign of underperformance, exit. That's where I'll go.
Where do you think, I think that, yes, you're absolutely right.
I
Coaching
love it when you
needs,
say that. I think we should highlight that in every episode, the 3 or 4 times. I've gotten to hear that. Like, just for the audience out there, 3 or 4 times against every episode, just so we're but I take it as a win.
I got to
Take it
butter
as a
you
win.
up.
There you go.
So
Thank
I think
you.
that you're right. Like we've got to coach our franchisees out of underperformance. Where do you think the tipping point comes of, okay, this is not a coaching problem anymore? Because
Yeah,
like all for this or that, it really is both,
yeah.
and there's room for both to exist. Where do you think that tipping point comes in?
I think a couple of things. It's a really good tidbit that I hope our franchisee listeners and our franchisor listeners take away. is that tipping point has a variety of indicators. One, actual involvement, commitment, or effort of the franchisee or franchisee's operating partner, right? Like
Yep.
you're going to know, right? You're going to know, you should know how involved that person is with their business. Okay. So for
Mhm.
instance, I was at one of our stores Friday. We are on a non-traditional location and there's a national chain there that's got a franchisee. And I see the owner of that franchise system there at least once or twice a week. And he's got 33 of these units, right? That tells me that person is in. So, first and foremost, the involvement. Second,
Yeah.
what's the responsiveness to the issues from the franchisor to the franchisee, right? Like, is there some
Mhm.
responsiveness to, hey, we're seeing this, what's going on? We notice COGS are up or sales are down, right? And then I think the third aspect of downward trend, downward trend, downward trend. If it's a continued downward trend over weeks, and there's no bip and hold, then the downward trend. Like that is to me involvement, responsiveness, downward trend. That's where I'm sitting on the tipping point. What do you
Well,
think?
the foundation of all of that is having access to the data and
Oh,
understanding and
yes.
tracking that those important metrics, be having the system in place to track those important metrics and then tracking them on a week over week basis. I think by the business consultant, when you get to a certain size, you're not going to be able to go store by store anymore. And so it's the business consultant's job to make sure that they are tracking those core metrics that are going to be important to the success of the business. And yeah, I think downward trend, but I do think that you nailed it. It when you see, and this goes back to that grit and stamina, right? And so when you see that franchisee engaging with the support that you are providing, that is an indicator that this situation can be turned around. And this situation, it's like there is hope at the end of the at the end of the rainbow.
Well, and also I would say if you have involvement and responsiveness and insight into the data and it's still downward trending, right? Then I
Hmm.
do think you have a offering or a location or some sort of larger problem that isn't necessarily due to the specific franchisee, right? It
Right.
could just be it's not the right spot or it's not the right offering in the market. And I think that's where savvy operators on a franchisee side and really compassionate involved franchisors need to start having, big people conversations of options
Mhm.
associated with ensuring the brand doesn't take a hit and the franchisee doesn't go down the path of losing money.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's also two different scenarios. There's the ramping scenario where it's a new franchise and they're not hitting
Agreed.
top. And then there's the existing location that is going through a natural life cycle that you need to pull them out of. And both require very different levels of support.
Well, and to your point, you need some systems and data in to know what you're seeing, right?
Right.
Because there is a life cycle associated with, the newness of an offering or when it goes past the honeymoon period or when it hits an off season, be it summer or winter. So, don't hit the panic button too soon and data will help you. But if you're a new franchise offering, you might not have that comprehensive data in that area. So that's where, to your point, what's the grit? What's the stamina? What's the responsiveness? What's the involvement? And then we can
Mhm.
start dialing into what are the causes of the downward trend. Is it average check that's dropping? Are we seeing traffic going away? Are we not doing any community outreach? And that's when you start like, coaching hard to then determine if you have an exit. So I think our this or that is if it's this, then it may lead to that. And if it's not this, then hopefully it doesn't lead to that.
Yes, and it's actually a perfect segue for our Dear Frannie question today. So,
Love
our
a
dear
perfect segue. Oh.
is at what point do franchise resales become part of the operating model rather than a
Oof.
one-off situation? And how
Oof.
should franchisors plan for that transition?
God.
I
Could
have
you
some
have
thoughts.
like yeah, I mean it's a complicated one, right? And I know you have an opinion on this. And I
Well,
I I love I love when you have an opinion on it. I love when you have an opinion on it. So let's
yeah,
let you get on a soapbox a minute
yeah,
and then come back to me because like I this is a strategic large conversation that I think franchisees need to ask during discovery days and franchisors need to like, have thought about. So Get on your soapbox.
Yes, thank you. I will jump up on my soapbox. So there's two things that I think need to happen. I think you alluded to it. What are we talking about in the onboarding of our franchisees and in the discovery day process? In my opinion, talking about your exit and talking about where you want to be in 10 years as part of your discovery process shows maturity in the system, because we know not everything lasts forever. And yes, we are entering into a relationship that is a very long relationship. Franchisor franchisee relationship is a 7 to 10 year relationship. But what are the ultimate goals of that franchisee? Do they want to exit the system? Do they want to pass this business on to their children? Do they know? And if they don't know, can you help them try and formulate that? Because when you begin with the end in mind, you have a path towards success. I'll give you an example. If I walk into the discovery day and I say, okay, I don't know where I want to be versus I want to sell in 10 years when this agreement is up, as the franchisor, I can say, great, let's get you to the highest multiple we can get you to in 10 years. And this is how we're going to do it. This is our plan to give you an exit program that is going to make you the wealth that you expect to have. And or if your plan is to succeed, have your kids succeed in this business, great. Let me give you a plan so that you're passing on a profitable business. And that way, when you're coaching them, you're coaching them to that carrot, right? Like, you want to have this profitable business to sell one day, don't you? Okay, well, let's follow the system and let's go down this path. And so I think it sets up a conversation of shared language and shared goals so that you can be working towards a goal versus working towards a number. Because when we're coaching to, we really want you to have same store sales up by 10%. And the franchisee is like, why? Like, what does that have to do with me? I'm fine with my same store sales being where they are because I made it, $100,000 last year. It changes the goals and the conversation so that you guys are talking about the same thing and y'all are building value in the same way. And then on the second,
Hold that second thought, and please remember, because you're on a heater right here. I'd love to have the broader conversation of what needs to be discussed at a discovery day that isn't, right? And you just raised something in my, wow, 15, 16 years of getting old in F&B. I've never had that discussion at discovery day. And I think it's brilliant. I'm just going ahead. One of my key takeaways today, I'm calling it, is let's have a where are you going with this conversation at discovery day, and how do we handle that truly operationally and internally, not just per the franchise agreement. So anyway, keep going. Great point.
well, and I think, just to expand on that a little bit, I've been talking to some operations folks and talking about franchisee adoption and how do we drive better franchisee adoption and how do we drive a better relationship, right, between franchise business coaches and the franchisees. And it was second nature to them. And so it may not be new news, but they really honed in on what is the goal of the franchisee? Is it to make $1 million? Is it just to have a lifestyle business, give back in the community, and aligning your communication with the goal of the franchisee? And if you can have that conversation in Discovery Day, does that open up a pathway to help that franchisee reach success? Because now you're talking to them about their goals instead of your goals. And I think that flipping the switch and saying, okay, what franchisee, what are, again, like, how do I relate what I want you to do to what you want to do so that I can get you to do what I want you to do? It's missing. We do a lot of talking at franchisees instead of really trying to meet them where they are.
Great point. Great point. All right, keep going. I interrupted your
My
second.
second point on resales. Look, I think that you will resell. And by resale, what I mean is, a franchisee will sell to another franchisee. It's going to happen. It doesn't matter if you have the best system in the world. It's not going to be a fit for everybody. Or it's going to be a great fit and they're going to be like, great, I'm ready to exit and go do something else. And so if you can think about what your resale program is from the beginning, what support am I going to provide to the franchisee? So this might look like, this is how it kicks off. You tell us we want to resale. We're going to send an email to your customers. Your customers are your number one source for finding someone to buy your business. We're going to connect you with a broker. We're going to help you with your valuation because brokers sometimes make you think you're going to get a bigger valuation than you actually are.
We
And
talk about
then
brokers at another time.
I know. And then this is the process for that transfer to come in. So resale transfer, same thing. And oftentimes I see brands that are kind of working on this on a one-off basis, which causes a lot of distraction for their sales team, causes a lot of distraction for their ops team, because with a transfer, you don't typically have the normal, you're going to come into this training and then we're going to have 2 weeks to set everything up before we actually open the doors. And so that distraction then, from all the other work that your sales and ops team are doing. And so I think that in systems, if you can think about that resale program ahead of time and at least get your sales team into a process and have a process, and then we'd come ops and then would come marketing, then you are really set up for success when those resales need to happen. And I'll give you an example. When I was with Painting with a Twist, COVID hit, and as an experienced business, we had a lot of folks who were like, okay, I'm ready to not do this anymore. This is like a real stopping point for me. And, for the success and health of the brand, closing locations is really terrible. And so the ops leader there, who's just amazing, immediately spun up a resale program that saved those locations. And if it had not been for a strong resale program, we would have closed half of our locations and been in a really tough spot. And so that really illustrated to me the importance of thinking through that real resale program in advance. And that's my soapbox. What do you think,
It's
Jake?
a great soapbox. I think we just clip the whole episode here and let you roll with that because that was unbelievably well articulated. Third point, shout out to you and the CEO of Painting with a Twist. During that time, we both know this person and I think this person hung the moon. So shout out to that person. Also shout out to lawyers being CEOs.
Well,
No shade on marketers, but I'm
she
just
is the one that really spun up that resale program. So give her a
wait.
shout.
I don't know that, but I'm just saying like it takes a good leader and a good leader, so it all worked together. So good on y'all. Shout out to that group. I would say, yes, I can't believe I'm going to say this. So props to the general counsels and or the franchise lawyers. The franchise agreements contemplate this, right?
Mm,
And I think what gets lost in the shuffle of either an emerging brand that's just offering franchising or a mature brand is it's imperative to kind of just sit down and let your GC or your outside counsel kind of walk you through the table of contents and the elements of the franchise agreement because a really well-written franchise agreement, and look, I freely, with the blessing of Plave Cook, plagiarize their franchise agreement. Like Lee Plave and Michael Ladehold, love those guys, best in the business. I get to use their franchise agreement form. I've used it since 2010 at multiple concepts. And with franchises I work with, use their base because it contemplates as much as a franchise agreement can contemplate, in my opinion, and it's well structured. So I think first and foremost, you go to the document and you work the document. So
yeah.
terms, we need to talk about as the evolution of the restaurant business happens and franchising, 10 years is a long term, right? 10 years is a long term.
Yeah.
So I think it gets into like, hey, your point, what's the end look like for me? What's the goal here as a franchisee? And how do we meet that? Secondly, does the term need to be adjusted based off of raw opportunities and sales and lease, right? Third, every good franchise agreement should have a, a transfer, a sale, or buyback provisions in there, right? Let's start there. So, to your point, I think any group needs to have a process or thought through a process of what not just the agreement provides, but how we're going to do it and or how we've done it vis-a-vis franchise transfers to family members, franchise resales, franchise buybacks, franchise closures. So that document needs to then become the conversation point with both the corporate team as well as the actual franchisee of, look, this is what it says. This is
Mhm.
what it means. This is how we've done it, or this is how we will do it. And that creates comfort and conversation around succession, transition, or future problems. The really good franchise agreements that I've seen have a predetermined amount in there, right? It's a
Well, and
predetermined
that's hire a lawyer, right? Because the lawyer's job is to think through what is going to go wrong and what can I put in this agreement to protect.
or right, or how do I enable, right? How do I enable a better business outcome? So, there should be a right of first refusal by the franchisor. So if you want to sell it to somebody, I have to at least meet or exceed that, right? So I think where you are coming from is brilliant. First and foremost, there has to be larger discussions at discovery days of what the goal is of the franchisee, right? But like, and I think when you bring a franchisee in, we need to start eliciting the empathetic
Yeah.
responses from enable us to give empathetic responses as a franchisor to the franchisee of this is where I'd like to go, or I don't know where I want to go. But at least we're starting with the end in mind. We're identifying what success looks like to you and to me, and then we're discussing what it looks like or what it has looked like. Query whether, and I'm not big for regulation, but you have to in your FDD detail, closures and sales, right? Like,
Sure.
is there a time where there's an item where, you have to describe how you've handled buybacks, sale, the actual, so
Right.
I feel like that's a conversation point that needs to happen in
Mhm.
discovery day. I think you're exactly right. There needs to be a process inside of the franchisor that's clear and delineated.
What
Perhaps it's
your
a
but what is
procedure.
your thought on the buyback part? Because that's a kind of program that I don't know that I've been,
Yeah.
involved in.
Look, I've with a variety of brands been a part of franchise buybacks or refranchising from a term standpoint where we as corporate will either go in and buy out the franchisee and we will just treat it as a corporate unit indefinitely, or we as the franchise will go buy out a franchisee to kind of clean it up a little bit or to help that franchisee exit and then re resell it, right? As part of a development group or whatnot. I think those things done correctly can be really beneficial for a lot of parties, right? So it can be either due to succession changes, family members don't want to take over, franchisees run its rope, we'd like to put more growth in the market, and the market doesn't, the franchisee doesn't have a development agreement or have any interest in a development agreement, maybe turning it around a little bit, they've sort of flatlined to the extent there is the capital wherewithal and strategic insight to engage in corporate buybacks and refranchising. I've seen
Yeah.
it very successful at a variety of brands. And I would encourage any franchisee and franchisor to have that conversation of what's that looks like. So are there parameters associated? Is it something that I can depend on or look forward to
Yeah.
if that hits? So, but it's
Well, do
complex.
you
It's
think
really
from a
complex.
where perspective, is it like, do you have like a team? Did the existing ops team absorb it? I think when I
Yeah.
think about it, I think about like, okay, great, makes sense on paper, but in
Yeah.
reality, a lot of the brands that I work with have one or two corporate locations, not necessarily a good amount. And so then the buyback can happen, but then it has to be absorbed somewhere, and then things get off track because now all of a sudden we have four or five corporate locations where we had one or
Yeah.
two. So it's
It's hard if you don't have a decent corporate base. So I
mhm,
mean, it's a multifunction uh, um, operation and project, right? So you're going to need ops buy-in first and foremost. Can ops absorb it? What does it look like? HR is going to have to be involved because you're onboarding employees now. There may be a structural side. Finance has to make sure that all of it adds up relative to the multiple that you're paying, the payback of it, and then what's the outcome. Your P&L has to be able to absorb it, or your balance sheet, depending on how you're structuring the purchase and the eventual exit, or is it a hold? Legal's got to get involved, the real estate. I mean, it is not a simple thing to do, but if you have a team in place that has that ability to move quickly and to implement, it can be a nice bump for the franchisee. It can be a nice lift to EBITDA corporately.
yeah.
Sometimes it gets people excited because you're not taking 8%, now you're taking 20% or whatever the margins are. But
Mhm.
it is not something to those franchise out there who have not done it. You need to make sure you have somebody who's been a part of it. And look, we talked about this earlier. There are brands out in the world right now that are hitting a wall corporately that are looking to refranchise, right? Like that's not you can't pass your problems on to a franchisee. Don't
Yeah.
do that.
Well,
Fix
fine.
your ship first before you try to sell your ship. So it's
Mhm.
complicated. But to your really good Dear Franny question, I think a resale, buyback, transfer process as contemplated by the franchise agreement is something that needs to be discussed in discovery days and should be a process that is at least lined out beforehand and understood by all parties. I don't think enough people are talking about it.
Yeah, I agree.
And
All
I
right,
think
so
I think they need to like I think your soapbox needs to be our synopsis. Just go.
the
It's
full
perfect.
synopsis.
It's great.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you had a couple of good takeaways too. And so my three takeaways today are know your KPIs so that you can identify what underperformance looks like for your system. Number two, think through your resales at the time of the FDD. I think that that was a really smart call out of some of that is already thought through. And if you're having a conversation with your legal team, you can really take those steps. And then number three is identify your goals with your franchisee early on so that you know how to coach them to better performance. What are your top
Yeah.
three?
First, like I love how does it end? Like, what is your goal here, franchisee? What does the end look like, franchisor, if it doesn't work out? Having that discussion, I've failed to have that discussion, I don't think at all at the beginning of relationships, and I think it's important. So I've learned something, and I'm gonna adapt that. And I'd encourage everybody to have that conversation. So huge, probably the best thing I've gotten out of any episode. Kudos to you. Second, I think, yeah, define underperformance and what does the underperformance responsiveness look like? And then three, what's the processes internally relative to how do we handle transfers, resales? Those strategic conversations need to be had by the franchisor before they offer franchising.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Good
Well,
job
thanks
today.
today, James. And thank you, listener, for joining us. If our discussion feels familiar, you're not behind, you're right on time. And please share with someone who needs to know they are not alone.